Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. It's not just schools and offices. The coronavirus pandemic has also forced big changes on churches, synagogues, and mosques. No longer can members gather for services. Even small prayer groups are forbidden. For local Muslims, it's been a big shakeup. Imam Hamid Malik of Beit al-Hafiz Mosque, that's an Ahmadiyya mosque, explains.
So we, as Muslims, offer prayers. As some may know, we offer prayers 5 times a day. And for those prayers, we try to go to the mosque to pray. And then on a weekly basis, we have Friday prayers, which is called Jummah. And so members try to take time off of work and so on and so forth to try to make it to Jummah, especially if they can't make it to daily prayers. Moving forward, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community nationwide has implemented that all of our prayers are now going to be offered at home in isolation. We can offer them with our families.
And as the Imam explains, it hasn't been easy.
In all honesty, it is very difficult for our members that are used to embracing each other, shaking hands and embracing each other and meeting each other on a daily basis. It hits everyone like a ton of bricks, but it is something that is necessary. And that, again, that does not mean that we have stopped worshiping. Matter of fact, I have seen some members that have started worshiping even more intensely now than they were before. So, yes, there are certain steps that we have to take, but we are in constant contact with our, medical experts and CDC to ensure that all Americans and our members are protected. To whatever extent we need to go, we will go to make sure that happens.
That's Imam Hamid Malik. And that's also the case for Roman Catholics. Father Craig Hallway is the pastor at St. Joan of Arc in South St. Louis. He says his flock is now missing out on 2 major things.
First, it's the reception of the Eucharist, which we as Catholics hold very close to our hearts, very dear. It's the source and summit of our life as disciples in Christ. And just not being able to receive the Eucharist and to have that one-on-one encounter with Jesus every day, people are really starting to miss that. And I've received several messages, whether it be email or on my Facebook page, people just telling me that, we really miss the Eucharist. So it's going to be a joyous day when the community is able to gather again. And I think the second thing that people are missing is just the idea of being together. Sunday church is an opportunity not only to encounter God, but also to encounter your neighbors and to be together and to say hello and to catch up on the week that's passed and to just be nourished by the community that you belong to.
That's Father Craig Hallway of St. Joan of Arc Parish in St. Louis. Our 2 guests today know those feelings well. Like Father Hallway and Imam Malik, they're now streaming services from a near-empty building instead of gathering with their flock. And yeah, that changes things. The Reverend Matt Miofsky is the pastor of The Gathering, and he's here with us today. Reverend Miofsky, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me on.
And we're also joined by Rabbi Susan Talve of the Central Reform Congregation. Rabbi Talve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah.
Now, Reverend Miofsky, I know from interviewing you on prior occasions, you're a people person. What was it like the first time you found yourself preaching to a totally empty room?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a bizarre feeling. And, when gathering is literally in the name of your organization, it's obvious that sort of people come first, and so I love being around people. But preaching to an empty room, it takes some getting used to, but for me at least, I just have to imagine. It takes a little bit more work to remember that there's still a lot of people gathering to listen, to take part in this common moment of coming together to center ourselves and to listen and to worship. And so while it's not right there in a visceral way, with enough imagination, I just have to remember that there are still people gathering, just not in the traditional way.
Rabbi Talve, what was that like for you?
Well, I echo everything everyone said, just the personal contact. But I will say that because of Zoom and because of the streaming and because of what we're doing between services to connect with people, I actually feel in many ways more connected. We've had a chance to call all 800 of our households to assess what their needs are. I think we're trying to stay connected as much as possible, and we've always been streaming our services. So I often look up at the camera and speak to the people who are streaming out there. And there are ways for people to send names, for example, for healing, names for the prayer that we say for the dead. And so there are ways, with technology to use technology to stay connected.
Reverend Miofsky, do you have any of those sort of interactive functions where, if someone wants to send in a prayer request in real time, that's something you could incorporate?
Yeah, we do. And similar to what the rabbi said, we've been live streaming for a while. So I've gotten used to preaching and interacting online. And so, one nice function of our website and of Facebook Live, where we stream our services, is while I'm preaching, we have our other pastors moderating the chat. And so as I'm preaching, the pastors can be greeting people still, praying for people, setting up times after worship to talk to people, and even sometimes feeding us prayers for later in the worship service. And it also allows our congregants just the ability, like we had fun last weekend, just show us where you're worshiping this morning. I'm here in an empty sanctuary. Where are you? And people can post pictures. And it was actually kind of cool just to see all these families gathered in living rooms all over the region, just sending us pictures of what worship looked like for them on that morning.
That is pretty cool. I imagine that you get this virtual feeling of gathering, even if it's not the real gathering.
Absolutely.
Now, Rabbi Talve, you mentioned that you've been able to make calls to 800 members. How is that even possible?
I know. Well, we're working on it, but it's, every board member took a page of the directory and is calling. And in fact, we called one member, an elderly member the other day, and he said, you're the third person that's called me today from the congregation, so we know it's working. But it's important, I think, to make that kind of contact and also to assess what people's needs are right now. So that we can connect them with services. We've also been able to continue to Zoom. I'm sure Reverend Miofsky is able to do this too. Some of our AA meetings, some of our mental health support meetings. And we pray then. We don't always pray in those meetings, but we've tried to put prayer into a lot of those things. But I wonder how he's handling this. I think the hardest thing for us right now is visiting people who are in hospice and people who are dying, and then officiating at funerals. The funerals, for me, have been really the hardest thing because, we have so many wonderful customs that we just can't observe right now. Funerals are, 6 feet apart, less than 10 people, all graveside, and you can't meet with people except with over Zoom, to meet with them, to prepare. So that part and the ministering to people who are at the end of life is really been, I think, a great challenge for all of us.
That sounds so hard. Reverend Miofsky, is that something you've had to deal with as well?
Yeah, we have both kind of the beginning of life and the end of life. We have baptisms of, newborn or very young babies that we're not really able to do right now. Certainly we can't go into nursing homes, assisted living facilities, even to just visit some people, and especially those who are nearing the end of life. So those are for sure the unique challenges, I think, of this season. And depending on how long it goes, I suspect we'll continue to try to figure out creative ways that we can still be in ministry, both at the beginning and end of life for people.
We did have a question come in from a listener, and Eric is wondering how you're using tech. He says his congregation is using Zoom for meetings. Do you have a particular technology you found that works the best for your flock, Rabbi Talve?
Well, we're using Zoom and FaceTime Live a lot.
Okay. What about you? What about over at the gathering?
We've really adopted a variety of technologies depending on the kind of group. So for worship itself, we use Facebook Live, we use YouTube Live. That's worked well for us. And then we just stream it on our own website. So we found that like multiple platforms, just in case, like Facebook was really bogged down on Sunday morning this past weekend. I think every church in America is trying some version of Facebook Live. When it comes to smaller groups, we do use Zoom, Google Hangout, even FaceTiming for some one-on-one kinds of things. So we're just trying to scramble, but Zoom has certainly been the one for small groups that we've used the most, and it's encouraging. I think like in this environment, even though there's so many challenges, we're also seeing in some ways more people engaging the church than ever before.
I mean, that's fascinating that you're almost overloading Facebook, which seems like it would be really hard to do. All these Christians trying to gather at the exact same time. Are you getting pretty good numbers of people tuning in for these services?
Sarah, I think this is the most incredible part about this is even though, similar to what Jim said right before us in the previous interview, I would never wish this on anybody or in any version of our world. But in the midst of this, we're seeing all sorts of things that we don't see during normal times. So we have more people engaging worship. As much as 50% more people are actually engaging Sunday morning worship. We have already in 1 week, we have small groups that meet throughout the week for prayer and study. We had a record number of new groups start this week, 8 new groups. And by the end of today, probably 10 new groups will start. And all of a sudden, geography doesn't matter. So we have people joining us not only for worship, but also for small groups from everywhere from Arizona to New York, Georgia to Michigan. And so there are some exciting elements of this. It's almost as if when you take away every other form of connection, people begin to realize how important this is to life and seek it out in a more intentional way.
Rabbi Talve, have you seen that as well?
Absolutely. I've never had this many people come to services as
wow.
now over the internet. And also in our classes, we're seeing classes and meetings and all kinds of things for adults and children just explode in numbers. And that's, I think it's because we're reaching people. And I think the other thing that I think we have to say to be responsible, and I really appreciate hearing, Reverend Miofsky say it as well, what we're doing is encouraging people to stay home. The people who can stay home just have to stay home right now. And so I think the more we can provide in spiritual support, and all kinds of support, it's really important right now because the more people that are able, that do stay at home, the more we'll slow the spread of this and get back to our lives.
Now, I know Easter is coming up very soon, and President Trump has made some rumblings about he wants the country reopened for Easter. And when we talked to Father Craig Hallway, he said the Archbishop of St. Louis has already suspended public worship for those services. That is not happening for Catholics. They want people to stay home. Reverend Miofsky, I know you had some big plans for Easter. How have those been affected by the situation we're in?
Yeah, I mean, we have a big tradition. We're a multi-site church, so we have several locations in St. Louis, and Easter's the one day we all come together and have a big worship service. So this year we were set to have it at Chaffetz Arena, a big celebratory worship service on Easter morning. Of course, we're not having it there. At first, we thought maybe we would just have it back at our sites, and then it became very obvious that Easter this year was going to have to be celebrated online only. And so similar to other churches and traditions, we will be celebrating Easter. We will be having the same incredible music and hopefully inspiring message, but it will all be online. And I was just writing this morning a reflection of my congregation that in some ways, and it's likely that this might be the biggest Easter we've ever had, even though we're celebrating it scattered instead of gathered.
And Rabbi Talve, you're obviously looking ahead to Passover. I know that's not just a religious ceremony, but it's also a way for families to all get together. Is there some sadness as you think about that not being possible this year?
Just personally, my 94-year-old father just moved to St. Louis this year, and all of my sisters and all of their kids, everybody was going to fly in and be together for the first time in so many years. And of course, that's not going to happen.
I'm so sorry.
Well, you know what? Better people should say stay safe, right? But the thing that we're doing is, because Passover is a home holiday, what we're really trying to encourage people to do is don't skip it. We need it more than ever. You know, in the Torah, you can have a second Passover a month later, but I think we need Passover just like we need Easter, and we're going to need Ramadan. We need these holy days. So we're going to train people next week how to do their own Passover Seders at home, even if it's just one person, and we'll stream to put people together. But I think people need these holy days right now, as the Reverend said, more than ever right now. So we will find creative ways to do it. But I'm with you. I'm telling people, don't skip it. Let's get ready. Let's get cooking. Let's get cleaning. Yeah. Let's get preparing. Let's order what we can. And then the other thing I think we need to do, because it's attached to all of these holy days, right, is we have to give people a way from their homes to help others.
And I know you guys both are doing a lot of work on that front, and unfortunately we're out of time today, but we will try to highlight that on our website. That's stlpublicradio.org. And I want to thank the Rabbi Susan Talve so much for joining us today.
It's an honor. Thank you.
And Reverend Matt
Thanks
Miofsky.
for keeping St. Louis connected.
Oh, thank you. We feel lucky to be in this position. And Reverend Matt Miofsky of The Gathering, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I appreciate it.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.